If you're watching this without saying anything, without commenting, without needing to prove you're here, then this video was made for you. Because psychology says people like you don't move loudly through life. You move deeply. And that scares people more than they'll ever admit. Most people think power is loud. They think confidence looks like talking more, posting more, reacting faster. They think silence means weakness. But psychology says the opposite. Silence is not empty. Silence is processing. And the people who process quietly see the world very differently. They notice pauses in conversations. They notice tone changes. They notice who avoids eye contact and who forces it. While others speak to be seen, silent people watch to understand. And understanding is where real power begins. Here's the part most people don't realize. Silent people aren't quiet because they have nothing to say. They're quiet because they're deciding if it's even worth saying. They don't react instantly. They don't waste words on noise. They don't argue just to feel important. They wait. And waiting is a psychological advantage. Because while others are emotional, silent people are collecting patterns. They see how people behave when they think no one is watching. They see who talks big but acts small. They see who panics under pressure. And once you see patterns, you can predict outcomes. That's why silent people are often underestimated early in life. People think they're slow. People think they lack confidence. People think they're harmless. But psychology has a word for this. Strategic restraint. Silent people don't reveal their thoughts easily. And that creates uncertainty. And uncertainty makes people uncomfortable. When someone can't read you, they start filling in the gaps with their own insecurities. They assume you're judging them. They assume you know something they don't. They assume you're dangerous. Not because you threaten them, but because you're unreadable. That's why silence feels intimidating in a loud world. Silence doesn't give feedback. It doesn't reassure. It doesn't explain itself. And people who need control hate that. Psychologists have found that people who talk less often have higher emotional regulation. They don't explode. They don't overshare. They don't give others emotional leverage. That makes them very hard to manipulate. You can't twist words that were never spoken. You can't use emotions that were never displayed. So while others get pulled into drama, silent people stay neutral. And neutrality is strength. This is why in conflicts, the calm person usually wins. Not because they're right, but because they don't lose control. Silence keeps your nervous system stable. It keeps your thinking clear. It keeps your decisions sharp. And sharp decisions change lives. Another thing nobody tells you. Silent people often feel deeply. They just don't perform it. They don't cry for attention. They don't celebrate loudly. They don't complain publicly. They experience emotions privately. That's why many silent people feel misunderstood. Others assume they don't care. But psychology says the opposite. They care so deeply that they protect their inner world. They don't let everyone inside. And that selectiveness makes them strong. Because when silent people finally speak, it's usually after thinking 10 steps ahead. They don't talk to fill space. They talk to change direction. And when they do, people listen. Think about it. The person who talks all the time becomes background noise. But the person who rarely speaks? Every word lands heavier. Silence creates weight. That's why leaders, strategists, and thinkers often start as observers. They learn quietly. They fail quietly. They grow quietly. And then one day, they move. And everyone wonders where they came from. This is why silent people don't win early. They don't get fast validation. They don't get quick applause. They don't get immediate recognition. But they build depth. And depth always outlasts attention. While others chase visibility, silent people master skill. While others seek approval, silent people build competence. And competence is impossible to ignore forever. That's why silent people often shock everyone later in life. People say things like, "I didn't expect this from you. I never knew you were capable of that. You changed so much." But the truth is, they didn't change. They were always becoming. Just quietly. Psychology also explains why silence feels lonely. When you think deeply, surface-level conversations feel empty. When you observe more, small talk feels exhausting. When you understand people, you see through masks. And seeing through masks can feel isolating. But it also protects you. Silent people are less likely to be fooled. Less likely to be rushed. Less likely to be controlled. They move at their own pace. And that pace is deliberate. Silence gives you time to think before the world reacts. Silence gives you space to decide before others demand answers. Silence gives you power without permission. That's why silence is misunderstood. Because it doesn't beg to be noticed. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't compete. And in a world addicted to noise, that feels threatening. So if you're quiet, if you think more than you speak, if you observe more than you react, if you feel deeply but show little, psychology doesn't call that weakness. It calls that control. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to change. The world already has enough noise. What it lacks is people who think before they speak. If this felt personal, that's because it was. Comment silent if this describes you. And remember, the most powerful moves are made quietly.